Welcome to The Culture. We rest at the pulse of the community, providing all things news, music, fashion, events, and everything that we talk about in between. It's a lifestyle. We are The Culture. Hi, I'm your host, Jessica Modkins, and welcome to The Culture for a special edition on Black History. I'm a proud resident and born and bred in a community in Miami called Richmond Heights. So it's no wonder in 2012, I believe it was, I began a journey interviewing all of the pioneers. I was able to sit with over 100 different residents from the community of Richmond Heights, and the things I was able to uncover were so memorable. Let's reflect today on a bit of our Black history, the story of Richmond Heights. Enjoy.
It was the 1940s, before any civil rights movement, before Brown versus the Board of Education, before President Harry Truman signed Executive Order 9981 ending segregation in the United States Armed Forces. It was the era of Jim Crow.
And Jim Crow essentially was the laws and customs that said we could not be in the same room together. If you and if I was white or someone was black, they couldn't go in the same doors together. They couldn't, even in some cases, they could not look out of the same window. Now, how horrific is that? So we couldn't gather more than 2 to 3. We still had to have permission to walk on the same sidewalks as other whites. We were still expected to be docile, to drop our heads, because the whole idea, the birth of the Ku Klux Klan began to arrive, and the whole idea was to separate as much as possible and to demean black life as much as possible.
Miami was, and to some degree remains, a southern city. So in the 1940s, Miami was segregated. Black people could not go to the beach. Black people attended segregated schools, could not go to libraries, other than the few that were in the black community. There were requirements for blacks to ride on the back of the bus and those kinds of things. You could not eat in department stores. Black women could not try on clothes at Sears or Burdines. So it was a very rigorously segregated community in the 1940s and 50s. And as the civil rights movement dawned in Miami, blacks were in relatively poor condition in terms of the economic growth and social development up until the 1950s. Miami was a backward town, and blacks were in the very back of the bus, literally.
It wasn't until 1946 that the concept of a planned community was birthed in the mind of Captain Frank C. Martin, a pilot for Pan American Airlines. Martin owned several plots of land in South Dade County, an area of Miami yet to be developed. Martin was destined to build a housing development for Black World War II veterans in spite of any racial laws or financial hurdles he faced. His decision to build the community of Richmond Heights was bold and very unpopular.
He was working at the airport. That would be about 1946 when he was approached by several of the employees out there to consider the possibility of developing something down here. The committee was of business and professional people from the black community. He did not think that it was correct that as a white man telling the black community what they should have. So he took the advice from Father Gibson. And the streets here are named for, like Mr. Pinkston was a member of his community. And there was approximately 12 people that were on that community that advised him as to what they felt that the black community would like to see. That would be the original development on plots and for Richmond Heights itself, and that basically was done through the University of Miami. They were just developing a department out there with regard to living and projection of what people might care for in the future. And that exhibits part of their thinking in the fact that you didn't want just straight north, south, east, west streets, the way they had curves to them to break it up. Also, in the dwellings themselves, they had a different type of fronts to them, so that it didn't look like a cookie cutter type of buildings, just one after the other. So diversity was the thing.
The news got out that Richmond Heights was being built for veterans. And we came down and looked at it, and they had houses, most beautiful houses we'd seen. We looked at a lot of houses. These houses were tile bathrooms, different type of roofs, and it was just heaven for us. So of course we put in for it. House cost me $25 down. While they're building this house, I guess I came down there at least every other day to watch it as it come up.
Yes, we caught the bus and came on Sundays because we just wanted to, we were just so proud of it. A house that had, like he said, had a bathroom, and I could choose the color tile that I wanted. And it was just heaven on earth to us. And we were just so happy to be able, even though they used to call it the boondocks, because it was so far from Miami. At that time, US 1 was one way going and one way coming. The only way to get down here, you had to catch the Greyhound. And of course, eventually we got a car in there, didn't we?
Yeah. Right after we put in for the house, bought a car, and I'd ride down there every other day and watch the blocks go up. Stand out there and drink me a beer, smoke a couple of cigarettes, and mark the blocks, put the cigarettes in there. So the next 2 days when I come back, if those blocks were there, I don't know who I was going to get at, but I planned to get somebody not working on my house. But never the same blocks were there. There's always 2 or 3 more.
When we first moved out here, I always told people from over town, which they call these the woods, that I was the first house on the last street, because it was no houses. I was like on a corner, and across the streets was nothing but woods. When my dad came to visit me, he said, I had a brick on the front porch. He said, oh, you put your brick on the porch so that you can distinguish your house from the others, because they all looked alike at that time.
It's time! North Miami Mayor Alex Desume and the city of North Miami invites you to the 2025 Know Me Music Fest, Saturday, February 22nd at Cackney Park, North Miami, with Grammy Award-winning recording artist Anthony Hamilton. Joining him will be the songstress Miss Chalet, the Levert Experience, R&B soul singer Cole Thomas, the legendary Chuck Rock, and more.
We're coming back.
This will be our biggest year yet. Grab your tickets now. The Know Me Music Fest, Saturday, February 22nd, from 6 to 11 p.m. at Cackney Park, North Miami. For tickets, search Anthony Hamilton Know Me on Eventbrite.com to get your tickets now. They're going fast. Saturday, February 22nd at Cackney Park from 6 to 11 p.m. North Miami.
I was at 14920 Jackson Street. I'm between Graham Drive and 152nd Street. But now when we moved there were no houses. There were only 2 houses to the west of us on Jackson Street and on 149. I was 14920 Jackson Street. And I think it went to 149 280, and that ended that. Those other houses started being built years after we had been there. So Monroe, Jackson, Harrison, Polk, and Tyler were all that first area where the veterans bought those houses. Then when they started building up beyond that, they started doing a different kind of house, and they cost more, and other people were able to come in other than just veterans.
For Black World War II veterans, the promise of funding for an education, small business, or home mortgage were great. Thanks to the Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944, or commonly known as the GI Bill. Homeownership for blacks also paved the way for voting, although the Voting Rights Act would not exist until 1965.
Frank C. Martin did specifically was target African American World War II veterans to live in this community because he knew the GI Bill was there. He wanted to give them an opportunity. The limitations on where black people, especially in Miami-Dade County, could live were oftentimes very restrictive, limited to communities like Overtown, a portion of Liberty City and Brownsville, and of course Coconut Grove. So finding the plot of land that he did gave an opportunity for these folks to move out of very tight-knit situations, maybe moving away from rental apartments into real home ownership. And what home ownership does from a political standpoint is it gives you a reason to vote. Because now your tax dollars are being used to fund things like police and fire and garbage pickup. And if you're not feeling the benefit of those accommodations that the county is supposed to provide, you become a very enlightened voter very quick. You saw a real sort of revolutionary spirit developing amongst the families in Richmond Heights early on as it pertained to politics, because they were kind of stuck on an island, if you will. They were separated from a lot of the rigmarole from downtown and the city of Miami, but at the same time, were expecting some level of benefit for the money that they were spending. You would see Congress people, whether it's Claude Pepper or Dante Vassell, who were longtime congressmen in Miami-Dade County, choosing to spend time in this predominantly black community. They had a self-esteem about themselves that, and really a bravado, if you will, that said, because this is my property, because I own this space and place, I expect to be treated as a man, and I can set my goals and my standards because of the community I live in. And that was the sort of special secret in the sauce that made Richmond Heights such a robust, politically sensitive place. You had all these folks gathered together who were already banding together for things like school and social activities and churches. So it just made a perfect partner to politics. And for the opportunist politician, you could come to one place and know you could gather a rich number of votes that could make all the difference in the world. Dante Vassell knew that to the nth degree, and he knew that talking with folks like the Paramores or Mr. and Ms. Ammons or the Blakeleys would lead to those community leaders spreading the message about the work he was doing. And of course, in turn, you had Richmond Heights residents that benefited from that relationship, whether it was Mr. Pender, who's the pharmacist who started his career working for Dante Vassell in his office, became a security guard and in Congress when he was a student at Howard University, or spilling over into folks, working for the county or working for the city of Miami.
You could count on Richmond Heights voting. That's why all these politicians would come out here and try to let you know what they're running for, because you could count on the people in Richmond Heights to really go out to the polls and vote. We were given this privilege, and to us it was an honor. And we were glad to have it, because we know where our parents came from, and we wanted better for our children.
The way things happened then politically, we had Ammons, had a big place. Janet Reno got her start right here in Richmond Heights. Dante Vassell also.
Donnie Vassell, it was Turner, Hendrick, and Vassell were the attorneys down here. And for the closings and so forth, they would be present, presenting the legal side of things. And Dottie decided that he would run for the state legislature. The fellow that was leaving, it was an uncontested area, so that Dad was all for that, to have someone maybe in the legislature that could help with difficulties down here. So as the campaign went along, it was very, very close. So Dad decided that, well, we have some new constituents in the area here, and make sure that they could vote, that they would register to vote. And he also had a little get-together after work one evening out by one of the model homes, and they had hamburgers and hot dogs and soft drinks, and he invited Dante to speak, and Dante explained to them that they were homeowners and it was their right to vote at any time, but especially now because of taxes and other things that they could have influence on. And then lo and behold, when the vote was counted afterwards, Dottie won basically by the number of residents in Richmond Heights. But Dottie also then went on to serve in the Congress, and I do believe he was the mover up there to make sure that blacks were put on the Capitol Police Force. They didn't have them at that time.
At every election, they would put out a list of people that they had screened, and candidates and suggestions of people that we should vote for, because they had screened them and felt that they were going to have that we were going to benefit from putting those people in office. And I think that's partially how Richmond Heights got the reputation that it has among the voters. Among the candidates now. They converge on Richmond Heights because they know we have a voting bloc that has some significant numbers, and the people turn out to vote, and many of them owe their office to us. So when the people from the community go to them with an appeal or request, then they're inclined to give an ear and do something to benefit us.
We'd have them come out and we'd talk to them, and they don't always do what they say, you know that, but when you get dialogue with these people, they remember you because you got a voting block here. And if they got a block like Richmond Heights, they had something that moved well. And many of them came through here that way because they got a hold of Redden, and if Redden said we go for them, we went for them.
What's interesting about this, when you think about places like Selma or Mississippi in the 1960s, the fascinating thing about Richmond Heights is because it's kind of its own enclave, in essence kind of making its own rules, subject to the rules of the outside world, but because it's so far off the beaten path at that time, African Americans were able to govern themselves. So they voted without fear of repercussion. They voted without the idea that the Klan would somehow come down and roll down on them, or that some racist sheriff would impose his will and prevent them from voting. So it didn't take long for the state to recognize that this is a high-yielding voting precinct. So 801 was, what would eventually become 801, was precinct numbered differently back in the day. But what we now know is precincts 801, 802, and 803 in Richmond Heights still, to this day, are 3 of the top 10 voting precincts in the state of Florida.
The Florida Constitution of 1885 made it mandatory for racial segregation in schools. According to Article 12 and Section 12 of the Florida Constitution, it read, "White and colored children shall not be taught in the same school, but impartial provision shall be made for both." Captain Martin deeded some 20 acres to the Board of Public Instruction of Dade County for this very purpose. It was tracts of land dedicated for schools to be built in the community, but it was met with opposition. The board was not interested in opening another school for blacks.
1946, 7, 8, even into the 50s, many homes did not even have a car. Most of them only had one car in the family. And of course, that was used to get to work. So the youngsters, and we were too close to a school even over there that you wouldn't get any busing in here. So we just made sure that the area was laid out so that the youngsters could walk to their grade school. It was deeded to Dade County, and they first wanted to refuse it. They didn't want to have another black school that close. It wasn't necessary. And so Dad said, well, it's yours, but under proviso. If you don't, you have a drop-dead period where you put some sort of a school on the property, and if it doesn't happen, it's going to revert to the family. And so Dade County sat there and hemmed and hawed the school board. So in the summer, when this school was to open in the fall, and that would have been the drop-dead time, 6 portables emerged and were put on the property.
Richmond Heights was infamous for a nurturing environment. Picture a place deliberately segregated, which may sound a bit odd, but for the 50s, it was perfect. There was a sense of community pride that exuded in the air. It has been said that even when undesirables would come into the neighborhood, they would commence to picture-perfect behavior. The spirit of excellence was infectious, with a positive energy that would spread through every home. In fact, in 1963, Jet magazine noticed the same family quality in Richmond Heights and crowned the community as one of the safest black neighborhoods. With self-imposed sanctions on nightlife and alcohol sales, Richmond Heights didn't even have crime. In fact, people even didn't lock their doors. Parents didn't fret over the children playing outside. It was approximately 10 years after the inception of Richmond Heights that streetlights were even erected. In order for the streetlights to be erected, a special assessment tax for homeowners had to be in place to provide funding for the installment. Segregation in the armed forces wasn't abolished until 1948, so black World War II soldiers faced racial injustices while serving and fighting for our country.
White soldiers was fighting against the black soldiers against one another. We all supposed to have been, fighting for the same cause, but we wasn't. We was fighting each other. And it was really, it wasn't no place to be at that time. We couldn't sit down and eat together. We couldn't do none of that. One Friday, I never will forget it, the white soldiers, they was in 35, 55 truck and coming out in 37, 58. And they come over there with their guns. And our commander told my sergeant, don't want the gun rack where we could get our guns to fight against them. That's right, this is what happened. This is how wretched it was over there. We couldn't stay in the same building or nothing. It was terrible.
Reverend Theodore Gibson was the president of the NAACP. Gibson's influential and inspirational leadership sometimes threatened whites. It was on one occasion that his life was threatened by whites because he would not give them the organization's membership roster, which listed all of the members' information.
They said he was coming out here to get Father Gibson. All us men got together. So a shotgun, rifles, cars parked on every corner waiting on them. They didn't show up.
Although many residents of the Heights have migrated across the world, they have taken with them that same spirit of resilience and pride that the community was founded on. It still lives on today. The Richmond Heights 49ers.
Thanks so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the interviews and gained some insight into Miami's jewel, Richmond Heights. Make sure to come back tonight and join us for another edition of My 2 Cents. Grab a drink, put your feet up for a good time right here at 6 o'clock. I'll see you then.
The Culture is produced and owned by the Culture Media Group and cannot be reproduced or broadcast without written consent. All rights reserved.